Guys, welcome back to another episode of the Conquerors Crew, and I have a very special guest, actually a doctor guest today, and this man is full of wisdom of all sorts of things. It's going to be such a great conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. But before we get stuck in, I always like to just remind everybody about the three pillars of the Conquerors Crew. Let me run through that real quick. It kind of sets the stage for the show, and it goes, it kind of precedes us, and it's just one of the things we do. So let me run through those real quick for you guys. So the first one is hope with the Conquerors Crew. And for us, hope stands for helping other people excel. And we like to do the show on Wednesday because it's Hump Day, and it's kind of that midweek check, right? Where maybe you're struggling and you're not having such a good week, and maybe somebody is having a little better week, and they could share a little hope with you. And that's what we just kind of like hope. And you know what? The funny thing about hope is, it seems like if you don't have any, and you're trying to muster some of, and you could just get a little bit, and maybe a friend calls, and you can give them some advice, and you're in the dumps, but you can help them. It seems to come back a little faster for some reason, and I don't know why that is, but I've just kind of noticed that. So that's kind of hope for us. The next one is grit, and the G is for grace. And the kind of grace I'm talking about is not really the grace that you give someone else when they make a mistake. I'm talking about have some grace with yourself. Just don't forget to be kind to yourself, right? It seems like we're harder on ourselves than anyone else. And the next one is resilience. And most people know that they watched our podcast that I've had cancer 3 times, and they're like, I never could have done what you've done. You can. Human beings are amazing creatures. We rise to the occasion. But here's the thing with resilience. You're not going to run an Ironman at the first try. So it's just like anything else. You got to train the muscles up a little bit. And so that's kind of resilience. The next one is integrity. And integrity, I'm not talking about the kind of integrity where you're like, hey, you over there, you're breaking the rules. It's more for Conquerors Crew, the integrity about really if 3 o'clock in the morning, something's keeping you up, and you look in the mirror, are you being honest with yourself about what's going on and what's bothering you? It's that kind of integrity that I'm talking about. And the last one is teachable. And I think that just about the time you get cocky and you think you know everything, you get knocked off your high horse. And I think as long as we're here on this planet, we are always learning and remaining teachable. And the last one, okay, real quick and easy, is no quit. So hope, grit, and no quit. So thank you, Doctor Dr. Andre Watson. What do you go by? What do you prefer to be called? Just so I'm respectful and pleasant and polite.
Oh, I'm very happy with just Andre. A lot of people call me Dr. Andre. I mean, as long as you don't call me the same things my wife calls me, that's fine. Just kidding.
Perfect. I can go with that. Right? No problem at all. Well, hey, so nice to have you. And just with the with our three pillars, did any of them kind of jump out at you on anything? Did you have a thought about any of them? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I did. I like them very much. I think the integrity is so important, and I kind of couple that up with authenticity. They your description of integrity I like very much, but it's really all about being your real self.
Yes.
And, of course, that's interesting in a sense because the thing that has to come before that is knowing your real self.
Right.
Sometimes, I'll have a coaching client that has, just a lot of mixed up things going on in their lives. And of course, that stems from having a lot of mixed up things going on in your mind. And then when you kind of you scratch away the dust and you look at what's underneath, and all the time you're talking to the person, you're trying to guide them so that their conclusions are their own, and it really transpires that they don't know themselves. Their lives are not a real reflection of what they have going on internally, what they want their lives to be. So, that was something that really stood out as an important factor, that integrity piece. The other thing that came out to me was resilience, because resilience is a very important part of my philosophy, and it's intimately linked in the way I look at the world with creative thinking, which, as you know, is a passion of mine.
Yes.
And I think resilience, so people will kind of try and coach resilience. But the reality is that has to come from something internal as well. It's not something you can grit your teeth and say, okay, I'm going to be resilient today. Because that is not really going to last. I mean, if you manage to see through the day, you may be in a worse state than you did at the beginning. Whereas real resilience is a function of how we think.
Yeah.
And it's, if you have a think about how we think in life, there are really, and this is actually proved by science, this is proved by fMRI imaging, where you can actually see in somebody's brain what lights up according, when they think different things. And it transpires there are two very interesting things. One is if you ask somebody to do something deductive or analytical, just work out for me, what you roughly think you're going to be paying in taxes this year. Just give them something to think about analytically. Yeah. And certain, little lines will light up, some neural paths will become illuminated. And then if you ask them to do something creative, think about something creative, a totally different set of neural paths will light up. And the interesting thing is, when you really dig into it, which is something I've been doing for 25, 30 years now, my PhD was in creativity in an organizational context. So, I'm really interested in the science of the whole thing as well as what I observe. But one of the interesting things is when you think about it, when you're thinking analytically, everything is very convergent. We talk about drilling down and focusing in. And so, that if we do too much of that, we become like a racehorse with blinders on.
Right.
We can see straight ahead, and that's it. When you think creatively, and I'm not talking, this isn't about, people doing art or sculpture or reading or writing or anything of that nature. This is the way we think. This is the stuff that comes before we do the art and the innovation. If we can train ourselves to be able to think creatively, what we're actually doing is that's very divergent. We're actually looking at the big picture world. And that is crucial for resilience, because, if you think about when you're in a stressful situation, perhaps it could have been perhaps two or three things go wrong, and things compound, don't they?
Right.
So, one thing goes wrong, you can deal with it. The second things go wrong, and suddenly it's like sort of, oh no. A third thing goes wrong, and it's like everything's a disaster. And they might be three quite trivial things. Sure. It might be, you spilled coffee on your shirt just after you got dressed in the morning. You go to the car and it suddenly, oh no, it doesn't start. And then, you've got this meeting, and because of all the other things, you're late for the meeting. Now, individually, they're not disasters. They're a nuisance, but they're not a disaster. But you add them together, and it feels like the whole world, is constraining against you. Now, if you're able to think if you have creative thinking in your toolbox, you can step back,
right,
and look at the whole picture. This is what divergent thinking is, and that enables you to say, you know what, this it's just one of those mornings, no big deal. And you go and, go relax, get stuff done, and everything's fine. And so, it's so creative thinking is such an important part of building resilience. That having that big picture view of the world and being able to say, you know what, this is actually, this is actually a real kind of nuisance right now, but in the bigger picture, it's no big deal at all. So that was the other thing that kind of triggered in my mind.
And that's awesome. I appreciate that. It's so insightful. If you don't mind, I'd just like to ask you, a few kind of just basic. I'm from the South, and we like to know, we hear an accent. So where are you originally from? And how the heck did you get all the way to the USA? And I believe that you live in Nevada now. So can you just give us a few minutes kind of where you grew up, where you were raised, and a little bit of that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I lived in Nashville. We all speak like this in Nashville. Just kidding. No, I was born and educated in England. I pretty early on I had a goal of leaving England. England, certainly back in the sort of 1950s, 60s, was riddled with a class system, which makes any other class system I know really, look trivial. And I was the wrong end of that class system. I had a fairly kind of posh accent because my mum was a cook housekeeper, and people who can afford cook housekeepers have got this, they speak what used to be called the Queen's English. I suppose they now call it the King's English.
Yes.
And so I had a King's English voice, but I went to the little local primary school where everybody was farmers' kids, and they used to speak like this. So I was a misfit from day one. The wrong end of the class system.
Okay.
But anyway, I left the UK. Well, in my 20s, I started to invent things. Creativity's always been an important part of my life. My mother was very creative. My father was becoming a world-renowned artist. And so I was always around. I kind of took the way that creative people think and do things for granted.
Right.
And I saw the dark side of creativity. When I was 7, my mother was institutionalized, and that was not really her fault. It was because we just didn't fit in. And creative people often have a little bit of a loose connection with social norms.
Right.
And certainly, a single mom in 1950s England who doesn't fit in just, gets ostracized, and that eventually takes its toll. But anyway, to cut the long story short, I took 2 of my crazy inventions from my early 20s to become global leaders in their field. And I came to the States to basically to set up a business here to market my products from England. It was very difficult at that time to export from England to America because the exchange rate was going all over the place. One year it was $1 equals £1. Just 18 months later it took $2 to buy £1. I mean, and so nobody wanted to import British goods. So I came over here to set up my business, and I wasn't kidding about Nashville. One of my inventions was a microphone. It was subsequently used by Elton John and Frank Sinatra, the Moody Blues. I mean, the list goes on and on. But that's why I ended up in Nashville to kick off with.
That is so cool. That is so cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was going to ask you.
Very exciting.
Yeah. If you just briefly tell us what the inventions were. So one of them was a microphone kind of thing. And
a piano microphone. Yeah, it's a very strange sort of device. It looks like a piece of sort of plastic belt. Okay. But actually, you stick it underneath a piano, 2 of them, and you get the studio quality sound of that piano.
Interesting.
And the nice thing is you don't get all the noises around it. So, you can have a drum kit next to it, and you won't hear the drum kit. And also you stick it on there and you leave it there. So, in a club or a cruise boat or something, you don't have to have somebody, get the microphones out every time they want to play the piano. So,
Right.
it became a very big deal in the piano market, and a lot of fun. I mean, I had an enormous amount of fun. And then towards the end of my entrepreneurial career, which was took about 15 years, and until really being an entrepreneur was a little bit for me like sort of owning a sailboat. There are two wonderful days: the day you buy it and the day you sell it. And I mean, there came a time when I just needed to do other things. So I but before I actually sold the business, I got plunged into burnout, and
Been
fully
there.
fledged card carrying burnout. I mean, sleep eluded me. I was pushing away friends and family. And it was just a brutal experience, and that stuck with me, which is why now, as a coach, I've developed a process of using creative thinking to build resilience, but also to get over burnout. It's a
Right.
very efficient, swift way of doing that. So that the two things that really stuck with me were that experience plus my passion for creativity.
Right.
So that's
Right.
how I came to the States.
Okay.
When I
Okay.
sold my business, actually, I went back to Portugal. One of my things on my bucket list was to design and build my own house, and I did that, and a few other things. I became a dive instructor, and I've lived
Yeah.
and worked in 7 different countries. So, I love different cultures. I just find it absolutely fascinating to go to a new country that's nothing like anything I've seen before, and you kind of see things and you say, "Wow, that's a strange,
Yeah.
interesting way of doing that, but it seems to
Absolutely.
work." It's just,
Yeah.
I don't know, it just broadens
Yeah.
the way you think, and
I'm the
it's a lot of
same
fun.
way. I just learned better uh, being in the middle of it. I want to taste the food. I want to talk to the people. I want to sleep how they sleep. If they don't do AC and it's sweaty and dirty and hot and nasty, that's fine with me. I want to do it how they do it. Like you said, sometimes
Yeah,
they do it the way we do it. You just go, well, actually, I kind of like the way they do it. They do it better than we do, and I think I'm gonna do that. So I'm with you.
absolutely.
I'm with you. There is a different kind of education and knowledge and well roundedness that one gets from traveling and going and doing and seeing.
Yeah.
You can't get in a book, you know.
No,
So
that's absolutely, and actually, that it has an interesting link to creative thinking as well, because when we were 1, 2, 3, 4 years old, we couldn't think like adults. I mean, our prefrontal lobes
right,
hadn't, matured, and for all sorts of other reasons. So, when you think like a kid, every new thing, you're not judging it. You're just basically you're like a kid with a puzzle piece, trying to fit it into a new puzzle, and it's like, trying to make sense of your world by using these bits of information. And that's probably why I love traveling so much, because that's exactly what we do when we're going to a new environment, isn't it? Our eyes are wide open. We're looking at everything. We're taking in, how people are dressing, and you're in India and you're in a taxi, and suddenly you're going past this bull elephant. All you can see is these big grey knees going past the window. I mean, things that you're not likely to see in New
yeah,
York or Reno or wherever else. I mean, it's a lot of fun and
yeah,
it's fascinating, but it is that different way of viewing the world which is so interesting to me.
yeah, yeah. I love it. I love it. It's kind of like you kind of get into like sensory overload because everything. If you haven't been there before, then everything's new. And I get tired of the same old thing, right? And I think we all do. And there's just some things in life that are repetition that we do,
Yeah.
and we do them because we have to do them, and that's part of life. But goodness, man, I've probably been to. over 40 countries, and worked in about seven. And gosh, I lived in New Zealand 17 years, so I would still be there if it wasn't for my health and some of those things. And hey, but um, it was tough. It was tough leaving my life, and everything. But I had to come back here for cancer treatment, and thank God it was the right decision because I'm still here, and I'm very thankful for that. It took me some time though. It took me some time to come to grips with leaving my business and my friends and everything. Right? I came to Arkansas, where I'm not from, where my parents lived for 20 years, and there's tough. But I can see now, looking back, right, using some creative thinking, and if I was to kind of simplify the creative thinking that you're talking about, you're saying like being able to step out of your shoes and look at the game from different perspectives, right? Maybe from the stands, maybe from the other team's side, maybe from the coach's perspective. And if you can take all of those in, then you really get a full picture of things, right? And would that be a fair kind of reasonable definition to explain the creative thinking that you're talking about? Or if it isn't, please add and correct me.
No, I think what you're talking about is the result of creative thinking. That being able to put yourself in other people's shoes,
Right.
and that comes naturally when you train yourself to do a little bit of the original thinking process. And there's nothing complicated about that. It's just we start by mixing things up. You said we all get a bit bored. Yes, we do. I
Yeah.
mean, we do. I tried to work somewhere where I got through the front door at 9 o'clock and I left it at 5. I couldn't. It was so stressful doing that.
Yeah.
After sort of, I think I managed it for 18 months or something,
Yeah.
and it was just so stressful that had to be, the process that dictated my life, that I ended up having to work for myself, and that was
Right.
just, that was just how it was. But the actual process of kind of getting to that point where you can do all the things you're talking about, where you can really put yourself in somebody else's shoes and so forth, that really comes. Let me just sidetrack for a second.
Sure.
The interesting thing about creative thinking is that it shares neural pathways with emotional intelligence.
Okay. Okay.
So, emotional intelligence is characterized by that very facility to be empathic and to be able to put yourself in other people's shoes. I mean, that's the real core of emotion, which is kind of interesting that those two things
Yeah.
actually have this common, psychological process. But you get there by switching things around. I mean, start small. If you drive to work, take a different route. We've nearly always got more than one route we can take. Perhaps you'll bump into some stores you didn't know about, or you go past a park that you didn't know was there. It's like, oh, maybe I'll take the kids there at the weekend, So,
Yeah.
and then you start to sort of switch it around a bit, and you say, I've got this problem in my mind that I can't just figure out, and you think, well, why don't I just sketch it out? I mean, I'm going to just do a little dream board of this problem. Just put it down visually, and that introduces a whole new set of neural pathways to look at
Right.
that problem.
Yep.
And maybe you're going on vacation with the family and so forth, and you say to the guys, "Let's all get together and produce a dream board." Wherever it is. I mean, we just get pictures, we get little bit write-ups of things to do, and we put them on the board. All these things shake the snow globe a little bit. They
Yep.
they they just make little alterations in the patterns of your life. We all need routine. We all need structure.
Absolutely. Yep.
But if you get too much structure, then it's not a structure anymore, it's a rut. and you just, you find yourself traveling along the same ruts. And our brains love to
Right.
do that because it's efficient. It saves us time. It's like, we don't have to we can get up in the morning without even opening our eyes, go to the cupboard, put our clothes on, and we don't really, we have to open our eyes to actually perhaps pour the coffee in the coffee cup. But, basically we're on autopilot. And there's a time and place for that. We've got to have that second way of thinking, second way of looking at the world, which is the opposite to that. Which is, I'm not working this weekend. The family's here this weekend. Let's think of something really interesting to do. That's got to come to you, subconsciously, like sort of, it's all there as a way of shaking things up, a way of looking at the world in a slightly different way.
Sure, sure. Um, just I wanted to touch on this just for a minute, because I know that you had cancer. Can do you mind sharing just a little bit about when did you have cancer? What type did you have? I think you said had to go through some radiation and some things like that. So could you share that a
Yeah,
little bit? Yeah.
yeah, sure. Well, I was 68, and I was actually teaching at the local university, and we just literally moved into our new house here. We moved in maybe a week or two, and I was diagnosed with prostate cancer,
Okay.
which is normally a very slow-growing cancer. Mine wasn't. Mine was super quick, and so they did tests and realized this has got to. This is already just into the serious category, and they needed. So they jumped on it all pretty quickly.
Right.
And I didn't have any physical problems at all at that point. I went through two types of radiation, external radiation and then internal radiation. And the internal was absolutely brutal. I mean, they're actually, that's where they're actually putting radioactive seeds into your prostate. And of course, in the course of, they used thallium, and that has a half-life of about 10 days. So in the course of that time, your blood has all been irradiated. And I went from playing 3 hours of tennis 3 times a week to not being able to walk 100 yards without taking a break. And, literally that was just, everything and it's still now I'm having to have procedures to undo the damage that those radioactive chips did to everything around it. That
Wow.
and that was, psychologically, and I'm sure this is shared by pretty much everybody that's had, a serious cancer. I mean, not skin cancer,
Right.
but a serious cancer. I'm sure, psychologically, you're floundering around, wondering what sort of place this is going to put you in.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just. I was very fortunate in when I had the burnout that I told you about. I learned to meditate, and that has stayed with me. I'm now a 35-year meditator, and that I don't think I would have made it through all the cancer stuff intact psychologically without having that. And I think the reason is, and it kind of goes back to the creative thinking process, in that I think the crucial thing is, for me, was to be able to say, look, this, all the things you're now worried about are in the future. Let's have a look at what's going on today. And that is not an easy thing to do, is
Yes.
it? I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. You can tell yourself that till you're blue in the face, and the mind will still drift off to the fact that you may not be here in 6 months. And so,
Yes, sir.
but that, meditation helped me do that. It was the one time of the day when my brain was sort of could quieten down and not be in this turmoil. And it wasn't continually sort of fear or whatever. It was just simply turmoil. It was like, I'm 68. I'm extremely healthy. Everything is going just, and suddenly, somebody grabs this little sculpture of Andre and goes, and everything's like, all the little kind of nothing. There's no stability in my thinking ability anymore. There's no structure that makes any sense. Suddenly, things that I'm sort of looking ahead to 3, 4, 5 years, I'm thinking, is it actually? Is there any point in doing that? I mean, am I
Right.
wasting my time? Planning
Yeah.
something that's 5 years, 5 years down the line. And on the one hand, people say, you just try and maintain your life as it was, and on the other hand, that just seems completely impossible. I mean, it's just like, if you
Yeah.
genuinely
Yeah.
think you may not be here in 2 years, then that will change everything that you're planning to do. I mean, that will be, it could do. I mean, it could do. It just really depends. So that was my
Yeah.
that was the journey that I went through. To some extent, I'm still going through that. The whole radiation process. They told me, you're going to suddenly feel like an old man. Well, I don't feel like an old man, but I
Yeah.
certainly do feel like a person who's older than I was when I had the cancer.
Right. Right.
But I'm going back up. I'm going back up the hill again. I mean, I'm going up the other side of this crevasse, and I'm getting more and more young feeling and fit.
Yeah.
Other than the various things they're having to do to undo the damage that the radiation did.
Yeah.
So that's it
That
in a nutshell.
some of that resilience coming out is what I'm hearing there. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
absolutely.
just roughly, how many radiation treatments did you have, and kind of how long was from the diagnosis to kind of getting over it was your journey? If just roughly, I'm curious.
The bulk of it was done within a year.
Okay.
I'm still getting chemo from time to time,
Okay.
but the bulk of it was done within a year. That was still the body was still pretty devastated for another 2 years.
Right.
So, in terms of kind of stamina, in terms of I mean, I sitting down and sort of writing a book. I was just exhausted
Yeah.
after 3 or 4 hours,
Yeah.
and that's just so not like me. I mean, the previous book, the last book that I was working on then actually is about creative thinking, and that's just become
Awesome.
an international bestseller. But
That is
the
awesome.
previous book, I mean, I wrote round the clock. I mean, I literally, my PhD dissertation, I for 3 days I didn't have any sleep at all. I mean, it was all in my mind and just getting it on paper. It was like da da da, da. And then gradually I'd have 3 hours sleep, 4 hours sleep, 5 hours sleep until the darn thing was finished. But the doing this book, I couldn't do that. I mean, it was just like sort of, I get 3 hours and it's like. Even if I'd been walking in my previous condition for 3 or 4 hours, I wouldn't have felt anything like that tired. It was just,
Yeah.
I was just exhausted,
Me
and
too.
that's coming back. I mean, I've got a lot more stamina and energy than I did then, but
Yeah.
it was sort of five years of pretty intense kind of restructuring. I mean, just
Yeah.
trying to have
Yeah.
a slightly different view of me and the world and myself in it.
Yeah. I totally get it. Yeah. I had I've had cancer 3 times, and most of the time they like to cut mine out. So I've had about 25 surgeries. Um, but radiation was on the pancreas for a tumor that was about the size of a softball, and I did that for 3 weeks. And I'll tell you what, we scheduled it, at around noon or 1 o'clock. So in the morning, I'd have I have a couple of hours to kind of do my work because I still ran a business. I had a business in New Zealand. I ran internationally for 3 years. I owned my own business. I mean, if I didn't run it, it would have gone bankrupt, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
small business. And but man, I mean, hey, you know what? After I'd have my treatment, I mean, it'd be 2 or 5 minutes, right? 5 minutes of actually being in the machine, and hey, I mean, I feel okay. And by the time I got home, about 30 minutes later, I'm turn all the lights out, just put me in the dark. I'm in the chair, and I'm done. I'm just
Yeah.
done. And yeah, man, it's rough, but hey, you know what? Thank God, that hey, we got it, man. It was pancreatic cancer, and I was less than a 5% chance with a year left, and found this guy right up the road from my parents' house in Arkansas. I mean, just what a miracle. And he said, "Hey, you got to give me a chance to zap that thing. I think I can get it, Trent. I really do." And in New Zealand, I had been through about 9 different doctors. I mean, from my orthopedic, my lung doctor to the radiologist. I mean, every one of them were like, you're go home and be with your parents
Yeah.
because you're not going to
Yeah.
make it. You need to plan your.
Pancreatic stuff is really is one of the worst, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. But
Well, you obviously have a lot of resilience as well.
yes, sir, I do. And I believe, I'm a Christian, and I believe in God and in the Bible, and I think that I'm here for a plan. And you know what? I'm doing my plan right now, talking to you. And that's it. And so, me and God got in a few fights. He got cussed out a few times. He still listened. I never turned my back because I just didn't. God doesn't cause these things. We just live in a place that's imperfect. And I think that God or your higher power or whatever, I don't want to, I don't try to push people into a religion, but I hope that they believe in something that is greater than them, that believes in the greater good for them, right? And hey, I think that I'm here because I'm supposed to be trying to help people have a better life and share a message and have conversations like this to help people. And so cool. Thank you for sharing that with me about the cancer. You just if you haven't had it, you don't know. If you have, you're on that team, and it's tough, man. Do you I'm curious about this. Now, do you still get scans? I'm sure you do. How often do you get scans, and do you get scanxiety, if you know what I mean?
With prostate cancer, actually, you don't need regular scans because they have there's a hormone they can measure, PSA. You have a PSA
Yes,
test,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I'm down to having those every year now because they've been getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So
Wonderful.
and that's a pretty good, even if the prostate cancer has gone to a lymph node or something, it will still show up as prostate cancer, even though it's no longer in the prostate; it's somewhere else. So it's a pretty reliable process. There are some ways that it can, there can be a false result, but yeah. So I still get a test now every year, and I'm past getting anxious. I mean, really. I think part of that is just simply because when I started to get my energy back, it was all so exciting, that I was not actually going to just be a, part-time vegetable for the rest of my life.
Right.
It was so exciting that I just focused on that, just being able to start to live a real life again.
Yeah.
And so, that just became a habit to say, okay, it's another PSA test.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
the heck? I mean, it's just, yeah. But it's the processes are really, I think it's very difficult for people to understand, or even doctors. I mean, they can show
Yeah. Yeah.
empathy and that
You,
kind of
you know,
thing, but if you haven't been through it, it's not easy to understand it really.
one of the things with me was, it was like scans every 3 months for several years, and then then we got to 6 months, and the thing that I discovered, and this is just a nugget for anybody that is listening, or that ever gets cancer or knows someone that does. I believe that scanxiety and the scan thing. I think it's real. I mean, it's true.
Yeah,
And I like to get my scan done, and then have the results the same day. I'm fine with hanging around for a few hours and getting the results same day, because for me, I don't know, obviously, as the test would get closer, you get a little more anxious. But once you have the test, or once you have the scan, and then you have to wait 2 weeks to get the results, that's just it's like you're on a hold for 2 weeks. I hate that. And then
yeah,
I did that a couple of times. I'm like, no, sorry. I'm gonna do the scan in the morning, and I'll have the results in the afternoon. And I'll even wait a week or two to do it like that, or do it, do the scan today and the results tomorrow, because I don't know. It doesn't. I don't do well once I'm in that limbo thing,
right, right,
and
right.
it's still the same amount of time, but for me, in that creative thinking kind of mode, for me, it's better to because once you do the scan or the test, okay, then you're really waiting, you
Yeah,
know, and you want to
yeah,
know, right? And you want to know, and so,
yeah,
and I'll tell you this as well: if you do have kind of the anxiety and the waiting and the stuff like that, do it at the beginning of the week, not at the end of the week, because if something happens and they need to take a day or two, you don't have to wait all weekend. They'll
no,
usually get you
no,
done right. And
absolutely.
couple of little tips, just to share,
Yeah,
if anybody's listening,
yeah,
about
for
cancer.
sure, for sure.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, so I'm curious, what kind of clients do you work with mainly? And kind of what's your specialty? I know it's the creative thing, but give us a little bit of your target market, kind of who you work with.
Yeah. Well, there are two areas I work in really. One is in helping small businesses. A few people. I have startups preparing for
Okay.
the journey into entrepreneurship, and also particularly small to medium sized businesses that have plateaued. They were all kind of innovative and all this kind of stuff in the beginning, and they've just sort of plateaued. So they're looking to ways to get out of those plateaus. And sometimes that can be marketing in a different, the same products in a different space. Sometimes it can be innovating with new markets. Sometimes even it can be starting export businesses for what they're doing. So, that's an area that I'm sort of well versed in from my own experience.
Right. Right.
And of course, the creative thinking comes into that too. I mean, this is really, about people are sometimes sitting there with products that or services that are just a little bit removed from something slightly different, which is a burgeoning market, and they don't
Right.
see it
Right.
because
Right.
we so often think in these vertical ways. I do this and that's it.
Yeah.
And the example that I give is if you sort of wind the clock back to like the 1970s, 80s, you could go down the grocery store, pick a box of cereal, and there would be a free watch in that box of cereal. I remember
What?
that. I was in my early teens, and I'm being dragged unwillingly around the grocery store with my mum, and I see this picture of this watch on the grocery box. And it's like, well, we've got to have this. You don't like that. Well, I don't like that, but I want the watch. And it's like,
Right.
and I tell my entrepreneurship students at the university, I said, if you were sitting on the board of a Swiss watch manufacturer, I mean, you can't tell me you're not freaking out. This thing keeps better time than a Rolex. It's got, it's free even if we buy the smart version. I mean, what can that be? $20? I mean, it's like, and you've got to be freaking out. I mean, it's interesting because what the Swiss manufacturers, although they're competing with each other,
Right.
they actually work together. They're very collaborative in terms of how they look at the market, sharing information, that kind of thing. And so they all got together and they didn't freak out. A few of them, dropped off the side of the cliff. A few of them were lost. The others got together and said, you know what? We're not manufacturers of watches. We are manufacturers of micro engineering. And they became the world's largest manufacturers of hearing aids. And they still are. They still are. Now, that's, to me, that's what creative thinking is about. It's like, you can go into convergent thinking and panic, as the airlines did here, with the exception of Southwest, after 9/11, and all the planes were grounded. Or you can step back and say, okay, let's have a look at this in a big picture way. And that's to me that's the example I always give, because I think it's just, you could really imagine an industry just completely freaking out and almost disappearing. There might be a few fancy watches remaining for those with infinite amounts of money, but but that's not what happened. They took a different view of what they do and where their skills are.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love that. It's like, I feel like, and I know this, even about myself, when I'm called in a situation, a work problem or something, that, when you're caught up in it, you can't see everything else.
Yeah,
And I feel like you get to be the one that comes in and provides that different perspective, that different view, that different look. Because
yeah,
I know that I'm like, when I'm caught up in the middle of something, um, I have a blind spot, and I know, and I'm like, I don't know what the blind spot is, but I know that I've got one, and I need somebody to
yeah.
yeah, man. I love that. I love that. And
Well, one thing that we do have, I mean, this is a sort of a known psychological phenomenon, is that stress causes us to do something called seizing and freezing, whereby, like, if we're trying to make a decision, let's say, our brains will choose the first option that they can think of and then freeze our examination of anything further. So we don't look for all the options. We wouldn't have found the idea of building hearing aids. We would have just launched in, the first option, think of the options we can do. Bam, okay, that's the one and stick with it, and you freeze.
yep,
And that's
yep.
it. That's what we do. And once again, we're like this racehorse with blinders on.
There we go.
The stress causes us to do that.
Yeah,
And what it's doing is it's actually reducing our ability to think creatively.
yeah,
And we have to be aware of that so we can say, no, I'm not falling for that trick. I'm going to be divergent. I'm going to think creatively, and I'm going to force myself to look at all the options.
yeah, yeah. I'm more of a cancer coach and a patient advocate. That's kind of what I had to sell my business in New Zealand, and just kind of naturally have fallen into that. And um, I usually work with guys, right? And it's just kind of the way it is. And if they like sports, I can get on a level with them about, if it's soccer or footy or football or baseball. and I equate it to that, and I'm like, hey, sometimes you're at the plate, right? And and it's your time to your time at bat, but sometimes you need to take a break. You need to go sit in the stands and watch the game and get a different perspective on your cancer situation, and get a different feel, and do that thing, and it helps a lot. It helps a lot. I really I really think that you probably really enjoy what you do, and and
I
have a lot
do.
of fun, and have a lot of fun, man. And yeah, it seems cool. Now I know that we're 5 minutes past the hour, and I'm just hey just giving you the heads up. Um, I know that you needed to go soon. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to cover? Any points that we haven't, talked about that you would like to discuss?
No, I think we've done covered a pretty good a pretty good selection of topics, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's important to emphasize that if you've got religious beliefs, then give them the chance to really help you through any difficulty you're going through. We've focused today a little bit on cancer because that's an experience that we share. For me, it was my meditation. For you, it was your Christian beliefs, and so whatever it is, and they're not mutually exclusive. You can have your
Right.
Christian
Yeah.
beliefs
And
and meditate.
I meditated as
So
well. I did meditation as well. Super helpful. I cannot believe how
yeah,
helpful. Yeah,
yeah,
really well. I mean,
really, really astoundingly useful. And
yeah,
you when you're in this or any sort of turmoil, if you're in the middle of a nasty divorce, for instance, you need things that are going to ground you.
yeah,
And one of the things that humans all need is structure. Especially creative people, they reject structure, and that can be very negative for them. We all need
right.
some degree of structure. Even in psychology, there's something called a need for structure scale. But we need it. If we don't, and especially if we're going through those kinds of things, structure is crucially important to kind of keep us centered, keep us grounded, and things really help us be in the moment, which is a very creative thinking phenomenon. Just stay where we are now,
Yeah,
with no point in worrying about things going on next week or next month or next year. This is what make your life comfortable and worth living today,
yeah,
and that will keep you. People will say, keep you sane, and I don't really mean keep you sane, but it'll
right.
keep you
Yes.
in good
It's a
mental
balance,
health.
right? Balance of some structure with some unstructured. I think, and you're trying to
Absolutely.
find that sweet spot. I
Yeah,
know that you play
absolutely.
several instruments as well. You're a doctor, an inventor. Um, let's see. Do you website if people want to get in touch with you? What's the best way? Like website or email address?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's my coaching site is planforchange.org, O-R-G. So plan the number 4 change.org, and they can click on a button there and make an appointment. Choose a time to that we can talk. I'm very happy to, if I can help people. I just love to talk to them if they just want to talk about creativity. I'm always happy to do that. So that's really the easiest way of getting in touch with me.
Cool. And you have your book, Creative Thinking, and that's available on Amazon. Is that correct?
That's available. Yeah, once again, that's creative thinking. This is called a coach's perspective, but it's actually really for anybody that's interested in creative thinking. And that's a very recognizable cover there. Coaches creative thinking, a coach's perspective, and yeah,
Awesome.
that's on Amazon.
Awesome. I'll make sure that those links are all in the notes and everything, guys. If you want to talk to Dr. Andre, I always encourage, the people that listen, if they aren't listening now, they listen later. If you feel like you want to talk to Dr. Andre, you have to reach out. He can't read your mind. You have to make the first step. If you send a two-line email, I'm sure that he'll get back to you. I'm sure that you'll have a great conversation. But guys, I always encourage you that you've got to muster up just a little bit enough courage to say hello, and then it'll go from there, right? Because we don't know about you if you don't say hi first, right?
Absolutely. Well said, Trent. That's really well said.
I appreciate it. Hey, what a pleasure to have you on, and what a sweet spirit that you just that your aura is, and everything. I thoroughly enjoyed talking with you today, and I love the thought process. I feel like I think a lot that way, but you verbalize it and you put words to it, and I like that. That's awesome. That's
Thank
awesome.
you so much. It's been a wonderful experience being on your show, Trent.
Yes, sir. Hey, if you don't mind, just wait just a second. Let me take us out, and
Yep.
it'll be just a second. So, guys, hey, another great session. God bless. Godspeed to you the rest of the week, and never forget that grit don't quit. We are out, guys. See you next time. Give me 1 second for it to wind down.